Good morning. It is Friday, September, February 18th, a little after 8:30. And after the little bit of snow, sleet, and rain we had, this is the House Discrimination Prevention Panel. And we are so fortunate to have the chair of the House Buildings and Corrections Committee here with us to share her knowledge, experience, working with accommodations in this historic building, both in the, especially in the physical sense, but also in a virtual sense, which we're also going to continue the conversation on the virtual sense and other issues with the Sergeant at Arms and the IT department at a later date. They are currently working on some projects right now, and so we're not quite ready to meet with us. But so thank you so much, Chair Emmons. I'll let you go from here.
Well, first up, who are the members? Is this the three of you? Is it a 3-member panel?
Representative Kalaki, Representative Taylor Small,
Okay.
Representative Kelly Payala, Representative Chris Matos, who is here but not visible yet.
Okay, so it's a 5, 6.
Yes,
Okay.
and then Damian Leonard and Mike here.
So I guess I would just be curious, not curious. I guess I would just like to know what some of your concerns are, or what, because it's just so many moving pieces, and I just want to be able to focus in terms of what some of your questions or discussions that you've had, so I can help zoom in on that.
Sure. So I shared with you the minutes from our last meeting, and where we had 3 advocates representing different organizations in the community of people with disabilities. And they brought up a number of issues, including access to the building, and then issues accessing for people who are visually impaired or deaf or hearing impaired. John, Representative Kalaki, do you want to add more?
Well, I think if you shared with Rep. Emmons the sort of summary notes, that's what we heard, you know, and as we've kind of looked at it now, it's interesting to think about, even in our new committee configuration, it's very difficult for someone to come testify in person if they're in a chair. Chairs actually won't fit in many of our committee rooms.
Right.
And so what do we do if we really are inviting people? So it's questions like that. The Vermont Center for Independent Living actually thought maybe an ADA audit of the building actually would be helpful to us, that, you know, to really understand all of the access and accommodation issues that people might experience, for us to work on. And, you know, it's been great. I talked to you, Rep. Emmons, I talked to Janet a little bit, and she's really thinking about how we can have a landing place on our website for any accommodation issues or questions, so people actually know where to go, and then they can help set things up with committee. I mean, just easy things like that. Damien and I spoke, and you know, the IT issue, even now that our live captioning that viewers are seeing is, you know, isn't actually always capturing what people are saying. So, you know, it's a dilemma. You know, YouTube has better captioning, but it's not live. So I think IT's trying to work out that, but, you know, that is not really providing access to our public who's watching us online. So it's just, there's you know, a bunch of issues. And then, of course, looking ahead, I know your committee's looking at, do we expand, and what does that look like for another floor, and what will that do? And I think it's a an opportunity not just to have access and accommodation, but to almost look at a universal design kind of thing that will be not just the bare minimum of ADA from 1990, but the best possible version. People shared with us that if someone's using a wheelchair, our current cafeteria is, next to impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, it's just, a number of issues were brought up, and I think we also heard pretty strongly that all of our staff over in Ledge Council, our administrative staff, all of us as legislators do need some training on protocols and best practices,
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty simple. We all can learn and sort of need to learn. There's been some bumpy times. Go ahead.
Sorry, Representative Kalaki. I think while we have Representative Emmons, I think it would be good to focus, and since the Sergeant at Arms and IT will come at a later date to talk with us, let's focus on the building itself. And Representative Emmons, what challenges have you had, your committee,
You froze up, Myra.
upgrade the building? Oh, did you lose me?
Yes, we did a little bit.
Okay. What challenges have you had in the past, and tell us what going forward looks like?
So the biggest challenge is to get everybody on board to do an expansion. That's the biggest challenge. And there's a lot of viewpoints on that with 180 members and the administration. That's the biggest challenge, number one. We're in a changing dynamic here in the State House in terms of doing in-person and doing hybrid in terms of our committee process. And we don't know how that's going to all settle in. During the summer and fall in the State House Advisory Committee, that was in the forefront of conversations in terms, we just don't know how that's going to play out. There's more accessibility to us than there ever has been before. For committee work, for people can watch us on YouTube. People can now testify remotely so that they don't have to physically come into the building. One thing that was discussed in terms of room capacity, and it was within the COVID world, that there's a certain capacity for each of our committee rooms, and what happens if we're at capacity and there's some folks that want to come in. This is regardless of their physical situation. What do we do? And we know that we have areas in the State House, some common areas that they could hook on to their laptop or iPad, and they can watch us on YouTube. So there's a lot more transparency and access to our committee work than there ever has been before. So we have to balance that to see where that's going to level off post-COVID, and we don't know that at this point. That we'll have a better idea as we finish working through this session and then what occurs at the next session. In terms of work that has been done this past fall, there was a gender neutral bathroom that was installed down where Ledge Council, where the infirmary was. That was a real concern of the Sergeant at Arms because there wasn't one that was available on the first floor and one that wasn't ADA. We wanted to make sure it complied with ADA. So that is now there. That was a big step. That took a lot of work to do because you have to hook up with current sewer systems. So it was really limited where we could put one. In terms of the expansion, what we're looking at is a floor above the cafeteria, because when that addition was built, it was built to hold the floor above the cafeteria. We need to do some probing to make sure those structures can still hold a floor above the cafeteria. The cafeteria was never designed appropriately from the get-go. From the late 80s, when that opened up, It was even worse back then. And we did a little changing in the service area. The reason why there is currently in this cafeteria those glass partitions and the doors, when the addition was built, smoking was allowed in the State House. So we were trying to separate in the cafeteria, because the old cafeteria was where the mezzanine is, where Ledge Council is now, is where the old cafeteria was. And smoking is allowed. So we wanted to separate in the cafeteria that section for people with non-smoking versus smoking. So that's why the glass doors are there. So the big part was for non-smoking. The tables that are in the corridor that go down to the speaker's office was the smoking area. So the glass partition and the doors were there specifically to physically separate smoking from non-smoking. So the service area is inadequate. The space now, the cafeteria, is dicey. If you build an addition, even in our hybrid world, you're going to bring more people into the building. There's no way around that. You build space, people are going to fill it. So if you put a floor above the cafeteria, what we're saying, let's look, it's going to be very expensive. Let's move the whole cafeteria, the serving area, and the kitchen up to that top floor. And then convert the area where the cafeteria, serving, and kitchen area, convert that into 5 committee rooms. And there'd be more square footage than our current committee rooms. Then for your current committee rooms that are in your 30s and 40s, where House Corrections and Institutions was, across the hall where House Ag was, upstairs where House General was, and where House Natural Resources. Those 4 rooms, you tear down the walls on both sides and you build a wall in the middle so that the adjoining rooms are a little larger. But you also have to work with the mechanics within the building in terms of your conduits, in terms of your HVAC system, because a lot of that is currently in those walls in those committee rooms. So all that has to be coordinated with our HVAC system. So what we have done, we have appropriated 1.5 million for looking at program needs within the building and how that can translate to the spaces that we're looking at. And then come in with design documents for options in terms of what it could look like, what are certain options, and what the price tag is. So those decisions need to be made first to give us those options to figure out how we move forward. And those options won't be available until next legislative session. And then we would have a better idea in terms of space and in terms of design and cost. And what are some of the hurdles that we may need to overcome, and what are some really easy situations? We just don't know. But right now we need to look at the planning stage in terms of, we put a floor above the cafeteria, we want to move the cafeteria, and then how that all plays out from there. So that's where we are for that. And I hope that helps explain the process.
Thank you. And that process would be under the ADA law, whereas
Of course, you gotta
when the
comply.
ADA law
You gotta comply
passed,
with. You've got to
there
comply with
were-
all the codes. You have to
Yes.
comply with all the codes, and that's.
But when the ADA passed, there were some changes that were just really difficult to make in the State House. And is that because it was a historic building, or just because of the nature of the building itself, or both?
both.
Both,
And we
because
work, there's some waivers that
Yeah.
can be applied. But you have to do as best you can with all codes. All
Yep.
codes. You got fire safety, you've got ADA, you've got electrical codes, you've got plumbing codes. It's very, very, the building is very, very complicated because number one, we're on ledge. Number two, there's a lot of granite and a lot of concrete. So you think that, you could just tear down a wall and you're good to go. Well, the walls have a lot of infrastructure in there that we just don't see on a daily basis.
Yep.
So
I thank you. I am aware of all of this, but I also am really pleased that we can have this conversation so that the public can see and hear us have this discussion about the efforts that have been made in the past, what the obstacles have been, and that we are earnestly looking forward to continuing to make things better.
One thing, whenever there's changes inside the State House, you have to work with the Friends of the State House. You have to work with the state curator because it is a historical building. If you do any changes on the outside of the building, you have to work with the Capitol Complex Commission of Montpelier. You also have to work with the U.S. Park System because the State House is on the National Historic Registry. So if you do any changes to the outside of the building, then you have to become involved in those areas, which can limit what you can do. So there's so many layers to this. It's like peeling an onion. You peel one layer and it exposes others. So you've got to do it step by step and get the information for the first layer that then leads you to a deeper discussion as you go deeper and deeper. But until you really know what you're dealing with in terms of, can the cafeteria hold up another floor? It was designed to do that, but we've got to check that out. And then you look at your square footage. The other big issue is all the mechanicals. A lot of the mechanicals for the building is on top of the cafeteria, on top of that roof. So if you go up, the mechanics are going to be up there, which is right near some residential homes up above the State House. And there's been some pushback from right now, even with what's there has been some pushback over the years from the residents there in terms of the noise that comes from those chillers and the mechanical systems. So we have to take that into balance for that. And we'll be reviewing this again next session. We just got to get this first step to know what options are out there, what it can entail, and what the price range is. And then next session, do a little deeper dive, and then you do a deeper dive after that.
Okay. And for people listening in or watching, what would you recommend that they periodically check out your committee page to follow this issue?
It's not us that's going to be doing this. Department of Buildings and General Services is going to put out, with our Sergeant at Arms, is going to put out an RFP for a company to come in and take a look at our current space and do those analysis about the weight-bearing floor to see if that's possible, and look at moving the cafeteria and the kitchen and serving area up there, what that entails for mechanics, what they could do for a layout for that, couple options, and then also the committee rooms. So that's going to be all contracted out, and that will be through BGS. Because they'll put out an RFP, and then we'll see who bids, and then they will work with, depending how many bidders, and then they'll look through and then choose a bidder, and then they have to enter to negotiations to sign a contract. So it's going to be about a 1.5-year process.
Makes sense. All right, thank you very much, Chair Emmons.
I hope that helps.
Yes, it's very helpful. And I'm thinking now that we have still have Damien, we might move on to the next issue where we have an active accommodations issue for someone who's going to be testifying in-house healthcare. And Representative Emmons, you're welcome to stay with us as long as you'd like. But I think we'll move on now to the to that topic while we have Damien and Mike here.
Okay. I would be curious to find out what is the issue for a person having trouble coming into healthcare. I would be interested in that. Is it electronic or is it physically in the building?
So it's, for the record, Damian Leonard, Legislative Counsel. It's the issue relates to folks who are hearing impaired.
Okay.
So it's not an access issue. It's in the sense of getting into the building, and it's an access issue in the sense of being able to participate in the proceedings.
Mhm.
And what it's highlighted, you know, and is that what we lack here at the State House is anyone who really coordinates ADA requests. And it's actually something that we're required under the ADA to have, is a person who coordinates requests and is able to say, okay, this is a request for a sign language interpreter. We've got a sign language interpreter that we can call. This is a request for computer assisted real-time transcription. And this is the contractor that we call for that. This is a request for access because someone is using a wheelchair and has trouble getting into this particular room. So we're going to schedule another committee room, which is accessible. And it's something that we've been required to have under the ADA for a while. And I think it probably was just an oversight. Mike has done a fantastic job in learning the requirements, figuring out who the available contractors are, contacting people, and coordinating everything on a very short time schedule. And we've been fortunate that he's had, you know, been able to have a really good discussion with the individuals who need to come in, and they've been very helpful in suggesting solutions. And so this has been a really good interaction, but what it exposed is that we're really not prepared as an institution to deal with these requests, apart from the challenges of being in an old building and navigating the issues around historic preservation and budgeting and stakeholders and everything else. We really are lacking in someone to help manage the process so that when a committee assistant gets a request, they can put in an email or a call to someone who's knowledgeable, who can then coordinate the moving pieces that we need for that hearing. So in this case, and Mike, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like we've managed to get the both an ASL interpreter and real-time transcription scheduled for the hearing, because individuals who are hard of hearing, some people are fluent in ASL, other people are not. And so in this case, we have both. And so we need to have both an ASL interpreter and real-time transcription, but it's also exposed that we've heard reports that sections of the website may be difficult for people who use a screen reader because they have a visual disability. And then, you know, we've also, as Representative Kalaki mentioned, highlighted instances where there are just rooms in the building that are difficult to access if you have a mobility disability. But what we really lack, and what we should probably develop going forward, is a central location that people can find on the website with a phone number and email and other contact information, and someone who understands what the requirements are and who the contractors that we can utilize are, who are, you know, can prepare a transcript, can prepare transcription, and then also can do or coordinate internal audits periodically, just to check to make sure that we're actually doing what we need to do, and can also coordinate training for staff, because that's the other thing is, you know, again, we just don't do this training for staff right now. And it's something going forward at the very least, staff who interface directly with the public on a regular basis, like committee assistants, should be getting training on what the requirements are under the ADA and how to provide those accommodations when the requests come in, and who to direct questions to.
And are you also in conversation with legislative human resources?
We are, but legislative human resources is really focused on the employee side of things. Their job is not to interface with the public. So their job is to provide an accommodation for, or to, discuss an accommodation and help arrange that with an employee.
That's what I'm thinking.
Who has a disability.
So they might, human resources might need to be involved as far as training employees, training staff.
Right. Yeah, they would probably be involved in coordinating training. I would probably suggest that we work with an outside organization to provide the training. So, it's legislative human resources does a fantastic job, but they're both generalists. So, they may want to just coordinate with an outside entity where you have people who are professional trainers who can come in, who can answer questions, who are very familiar with the ADA requirements. Because it is something here, this is the people's house, and we need to ensure that it's actually available to all Vermonters who want to come in and participate, whether that's just listening in on a committee proceeding or actually testifying, or listening in on the floor or actually testifying. And it's challenging, but it's, apart from the physical infrastructure, which has a whole host of challenges that I can't begin to comprehend because I don't work with it. Programmatically, we need to ensure that we have some resources available here just so we can do the best that we can with the existing facilities that we've got to ensure that people have equal access and they're not being excluded or treated differently simply because they have a disability. And that's really our obligation, is to ensure equal access to the process for everyone.
Absolutely. I see Representative Kulaki has a question or comment, and also would love to hear from you, Mike. Representative Kulaki?
Unfortunately, it's 9:00 and I have to go to my committee meeting, so I apologize. But I want to thank you, Representative Emmons and Damien and Mike and Mario, about working on this. It's so incredible. Just as we come together and put we work for solutions. So I'm very appreciative, and I look forward to continue the conversation. Thank you.
As we are you, Representative. Thank you.
And I have to scoot out too, but thank you. This has been an important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for coming.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we've actually dropped below a quorum at this point. So I'm not sure, Madam Chair.
Let's stop for now, and
Okay.
I'm not sure how to. I do want to have more time to talk about this so the rest of the committee can hear it, and have time for Mike to pitch in as well. So
Yeah.
get
so
another at the next meeting, some more time.
I sent the committee, and Mike posted to the website the federal government's ADA primer for state and local governments. It's a pretty helpful document. It spends a lot of time talking about physical access, but I think there are a couple sections in there that are worth looking at. The first is around communications with individuals with disabilities. That kind of gives you an idea of what the obligations are for staff here as we're arranging these accommodations. And then the sections on access to programs and planning for success in terms of having a coordinator and doing staff training are, I think, really helpful addressing the programmatic issues, that I was talking about, where we need staff and training to address this. So, but anyway,
Thank you.
just wanted to highlight that, and I have to run the my committee hearing too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I will check all of that out. And Mike, I'll be in touch with you about our next meeting.
Sounds good, Representative Cordes. I'm taking